The merchant vessel Vethanar drifted through the neutral zone at minimum thrust, her captain, a four-armed Drosian named Quell-9, watching the star charts with the kind of focused dread usually reserved for solar storms and tax audits. The coordinates on his screen were highlighted in red. Not the soft amber of caution. Not the blinking yellow of advisory. Pure arterial red. Galactic Trade Authority warning level, absolute. He had seen that color once before. It marked the HFY exclusion zone, where a dead star's radiation could strip polymer hulls to bare metal in 40 seconds. He had given that zone a 3-parsec berth and slept soundly. This zone was different. "Captain," said his navigator, a young Drosian named Sel, who still had the wide, curious eyes of someone who had not yet learned that curiosity was a luxury. "The shortest route to Cygnus Market runs directly through Sector 7 Kappa, the human sovereignty zone." She paused. "If we reroute around it, we add 11 days to the journey." 11 days, Captain. "The ferium spores will spoil." Quell-9 said nothing for a long moment. He reached into the compartment beneath his command chair and withdrew a data chip. Old, scratched, the kind that held information too important to trust to network storage. He slid it into the console. The file that opened was not a regulation document. It was a story. The kind that traders passed between themselves in docking bays and cargo holds and the back tables of station taverns. "Read this," he said quietly. "Then tell me again about the 11 days. The story on the chip was titled, "The Account of Merchant Captain Drevsol, filed with the Galactic Trade Authority, Stardate 4471.8. Testimony voluntary." Sel read. Her eyes, which had been wide with youth and impatience, slowly changed. By the third paragraph she stopped blinking. By the sixth she had forgotten she was holding her navigation stylus. It hit the floor and she did not look down. The account began near what humans called the Kepler boundary, an invisible line drawn across 17 star systems that marked the edge of human sovereign space. Drevsol had been running a route similar to Sel's. He had cargo spoiling. He had a client waiting. He had done the math as all traders do, and the math had said, risk the shortcut. The first sign was the silence. Not the comfortable silence of deep space, but the sudden, absolute absence of all ambient signals, the background chatter of beacons, relays, automated buoys. Everything went dark the moment his ship crossed the boundary. Not because it was jammed. Because it had been noticed. The second sign was the light. A pinpoint directly ahead. Growing. Drevsol's account described the human vessel with the careful, traumatized precision of someone who had spent weeks trying to find words for something that had no equivalent in their experience. He called it, a blade made of a sun. 300 meters long, matte black, moving with a silence that felt deliberate, the way a predator moves quietly not because it lacks power, but because it is choosing not to spend it yet. The humans did not hail him. They did not issue warnings. They simply appeared on all his screens simultaneously, a single line of text, broadcast on every frequency his ship was capable of receiving. "You are in human space. Hold position." Drevsol held position. He had the wisdom, at least, to do that much. What followed was not an interrogation. It was something the merchant captain struggled to describe. He eventually settled on the word, assessment. A human officer appeared on his communication screen. Young by human standards. Dark eyes. No visible weapons, which somehow made it worse. She asked him 3 questions. Just 3. Where did you come from? Where are you going? Why are you here? He answered honestly. He explained the spoiling cargo, the reroute cost, the deadline. He used the word necessity. He thought that might help. The human officer looked at him for 4 full seconds. He counted, and then said, "Turn around. Go back the way you came. If we see your registration again inside this boundary, we will not have this conversation." She did not explain what they would have instead. She did not need to. Drevsol turned around. He lost the cargo. He paid the penalty to his client. He filed the testimony not because the GTA required it, but because he said, and this was the line that made Sel finally look up from the data chip, "I want every trader in the Orion Arm to understand something I did not understand before that day. The humans are not being dramatic. They are not posturing. When they drew that line, they meant it. And whatever is behind that line, whatever they are protecting or building or becoming, they have decided that the rest of the galaxy does not get to know. Not yet. Maybe not ever. And I believe, with everything I experienced in those 47 minutes inside their boundary, that we should respect that. Not because we have to. Because we should." Quell-9 took the chip back when Sel was done. He slid it into his pocket. 11 days, he said, already entering the reroute coordinates. The ferium spores can spoil. We will find another cargo. We will find another client. He looked at the red zone on the chart. We will go around. Cell nodded. She did not argue. She picked up her stylus from the floor and got to work. In the forward viewport, the stars were beautiful and plentiful and going in entirely the right direction. Away from the red zone, away from the boundary, away from whatever waited on the other side of the line that humanity had drawn around itself like a wound that was still, somehow, healing. Or perhaps not healing. Perhaps growing. 11 days. It seemed like a very reasonable price. The bar on Tharsis Deep Port did not have a name. Bars in places like this rarely did. Names attracted attention, and attention attracted Port Authority inspectors, and Port Authority inspectors had an uncomfortable habit of asking about cargo manifests and hull registration numbers and the small, sealed containers in the back of the cold storage unit that absolutely did not contain what the manifest said they contained. So, no name. Just a door, a smell, and a bartender named Goss who poured drinks in measures that suggested she had given up on precision some years ago and found the experience deeply liberating. The alien at the end of the bar was a Vreth, tall, silver-skinned, with the four-jointed fingers and permanently mournful expression characteristic of his species. His name was Calathru and he was, by profession, the best smuggler in the Cygnus Belt. Or he had been. He was drinking now with the focused commitment of someone retiring a skill set. The human who sat down next to him did not introduce herself. She ordered something brown, received something brown, and drank it. Then she said, "You're the one who tried to run the Theta Corridor 6 months ago." Calathru looked at her. In Vreth culture, looking directly at another being was considered an aggressive act. He had stopped caring about cultural niceties around the same time he had started drinking like this. "Who told you that?" "Everyone in 3 sectors," she said. "You're famous. You're the smuggler who tried to run cargo through the human sovereignty zone and came back." She paused. "Most people find that second part surprising." Calathru drank. Most people would be right too. He did not particularly want to tell the story. He had told it 4 times already to various interested parties. Other smugglers seeking intelligence, a GTA risk assessor, a journalist who had never published it because she said she was not sure people would believe it. But something about the way the human woman was watching him, with that particular brand of human patience that always seemed faintly dangerous, made him feel that not telling it would be worse. "The Theta Corridor runs 40 light minutes through the edge of what humans call the Kepler Deep," he began. 18 months ago I ran it 3 times. Easy. No contacts, no signals, no intercepts. I thought the human patrol schedules had a gap. I thought I'd found it." He turned his glass. "I had not found a gap." "What had you found?" the woman asked. "Permission," said Calathru. "I had found permission. They knew I was there all 3 times. They were watching. And they let me through because..." He stopped. This was the part that still sat wrong in him even now, even with several measures of unnamed alcohol between him and the memory. Because they were learning from me. Mapping my route. Timing my speed. Understanding exactly how a Vreth smuggling vessel moves, what signatures it gives, how it behaves when it thinks it's unseen. The human woman set down her glass. "They used you as a training exercise." "The 4th run," said Calathru, "was different. I had new cargo. High value. I thought it would be the same. I entered the corridor. And then every system on my ship activated simultaneously." He touched his temple unconsciously. "Not just navigation. Not just communications. Everything. My environmental controls, my engine limiters, my life support redundancies, all of it for exactly 6 seconds, under their control. Not damaged. Not destroyed. Controlled. They were showing me what they could do." The bar was quiet enough that the hum of the ventilation system was audible. "Then a voice," Calathru continued. "Not on the communications channel. Internal speakers. Like they were already inside the ship. A human voice, calm, almost bored. They said, 'Calathru, this is the last time you will travel through this corridor. Turn around. Your previous 3 runs have been logged, analyzed, and archived. This run will be your last because we are telling you it will be. There is no threat here. There is no negotiation. There is only this: we know you, we have learned from you, and we no longer need you. Go home." He finished his drink. Goss refilled it without being asked. "I turned around," said Calathru. "I have not run a single route that comes within 8 parsecs of human space since that day. I have told every colleague I have. I have told competitors I despise." He looked at the human woman beside him. "I am telling you now, and I assume you already know everything I've said because you're human and humans seem to know things before they're told." The woman smiled. It was not unkind. We don't know everything, she said. We just pay very close attention. She placed a credit chip on the bar, enough for several more unnamed drinks. The Theta corridor is being decommissioned. There's a new automated relay system going in. Nothing will be able to pass through it at all in about 3 months. She stood. I wanted you to know that you were the last one. The last outsider who ever saw the inside of it. Why does that matter? Calathru asked. She was already walking toward the door. Because in 200 years, when historians write about this period, someone might want to interview the last person who saw what humans were building in there. Before we were ready. She paused at the door. You'll want to stay sober enough to remember what you saw. She left. Calathru looked at his drink for a long time. Then he pushed it away and asked Goss for water. He was not sure what he had seen, in those 6 seconds when the humans had held his ship like a toy in an open hand. He was not sure he had words for it. But he was very sure of one thing. Whatever humans were building in their space, they were not building it for the galaxy. They were building it for themselves. And when it was finished, if it was ever finished, the galaxy would find out about it in the way that mattered. All at once. Ambassador Thessaly Vor had held the Drosian seat on the Galactic Trade Authority High Council for 31 years. In that time she had negotiated 14 trade agreements, mediated 3 interstellar disputes and personally drafted the Neutral Zone Accords of Stardate 4469, which were considered, at least by those who had drafted them, the most elegant piece of multilateral diplomacy in the modern era. She had never, in 31 years, been afraid of a species at the negotiating table. Until today. The human representative was not intimidating in the way that the Krethal were intimidating, physically massive, 7-limbed, with a voice like a collapsing cave system. He was not intimidating in the way that the Vreth were, with their elaborate and deeply confusing system of social signals that could mean either, I respect you, or, I intend to end you depending on the angle of the head. The human representative, Ambassador James Okafor, according to the nameplate, which he had placed with a small smile and then never looked at again, was simply a man. Medium height. Unhurried. He had a cup of something warm and he drank it at intervals that suggested he was not thinking about the drink at all but about something else entirely. That was, Thessaly Vor thought, the most frightening thing. The thinking about something else. The agenda item was simple, or had appeared simple when it was placed on the council docket 6 weeks ago. Resolution 7741, Proposal for Joint Mapping Survey of Sector Clusters 7 through 12, including Human Sovereignty Zone Periphery. The proposal had been introduced by the Vreth Commercial Coalition. It was framed as a scientific initiative. Mapping, they said, was merely cartographic. Neutral. In the interest of all species. They had even, with what Thessaly Vor recognized as impressive optimism, included a clause about shared data repositories and collaborative findings. Ambassador Okafor had read the full proposal in the 2 minutes before the session began. She had watched him do it. He had not taken notes. He had not conferred with his delegation. He had simply read, set the document down, and drunk his warm beverage. Now it was time for responses. 7 ambassadors spoke before Okafor. 6 supported the resolution with varying degrees of enthusiasm. 1. The Kethmar representative, a species that had learned centuries ago that disagreeing with whichever side held the largest fleet was medically inadvisable, abstained, which everyone understood as a form of polite fear. Ambassador Okafor stood when it was his turn. He did not activate the formal address podium. He remained at the table. He spoke at a volume that required the chamber to be quiet to hear him, which meant the chamber became very quiet very quickly. I want to thank the council for this proposal, he said, and his tone suggested he actually meant it, which was more unsettling than sarcasm would have been. It's thoughtful. It's well constructed. And the framing, scientific cooperation, shared data, cartographic neutrality, that's impressive work. The coalition has good writers. Thessaly Vor watched the Vreth ambassador shift very slightly in his seat. Human sovereign space, Okafor continued, is not a restriction we placed on the galaxy. It is a boundary we placed on ourselves. We have chosen, as a species and a civilization, to conduct certain activities, certain developments, in private. Not because we are hostile. Not because we don't trust the council. He paused. Well, not entirely because of that. There was no laughter. It was the kind of room where laughter had been forgotten. The proposal asks for peripheral mapping. Just the edges, it says. Just a look at the boundary regions. Just numbers and star positions and gravitational data. He let that sit for a moment. I want to tell you what the boundary regions contain so that we are all clear on what this vote is actually about. He touched a control on the table. The chamber's central display activated. It showed a star map, the human sovereignty zone rendered in gray with a thin ring around it in amber. The periphery. In the last 11 years, said Okafor, humanity has launched 14,206 independent space platforms in the sovereignty zone. Not military. Not weapons systems. Infrastructure. Power generation, data relay, manufacturing, agricultural space habitats, medical research stations, long-range communication arrays. He looked around the chamber. We are building a civilization inside our boundaries. A complete, self-contained, internally sufficient civilization. Not because we intend to close ourselves off from the galaxy permanently, but because we are not ready to open ourselves to it yet. He deactivated the display. The peripheral mapping would let your best scientists and analysts, and I know several of them and they are very good, extrapolate inward from the boundary data and build an approximate picture of what we're doing. We know this because we have modeled it. We know exactly how much information the cartographic data would carry. He sat down. So our answer to Resolution 7741 is no. A clear, respectful, final no. And our request to the Council is that the resolution not be resubmitted in modified form. We will know if it has been modified only in language and not in intent. The chamber was silent for an extended moment. Then the Council chair, a Drosian of the old school who had learned diplomacy when diplomacy meant what the words said and not something adjacent to them, asked, with remarkable composure, whether Ambassador Okafor had anything further to add. One thing, said Okafor. He picked up his warm drink. We are not what you think we are. We are not what we were. When we open our doors, and we will open them, the relationship between humanity and the Galactic Trade Authority will be very different from this one. He looked at the table, then at the room. We are hoping it will be better. We are working very hard to make it better. We would appreciate the space, literally, to do that work. Resolution 7741 was withdrawn from the docket 40 minutes later. Ambassador Thessaly Vor wrote in her private log that night, I have been in this chamber for 3 decades. I have seen species negotiate from strength, from weakness, from desperation, from arrogance. Today I saw something different. I saw a species negotiate from certainty. Not the certainty of force. The certainty of direction. They know where they are going. And that, more than any fleet, more than any weapon, is the most powerful thing I have ever encountered at this table. She did not file that log publicly. Some observations she had learned were better kept private. Survey vessel Arden had been in the deep black for 14 months when science officer Yevtal submitted the report that would eventually be classified by the GTA at the highest available secrecy tier, not because it was dangerous, but because they genuinely did not know what to do with it. Yevtal was a Kethmar, a species not known for extraordinary courage or extraordinary anything really, which was why they made excellent scientists. Excellence, in Kethmar culture, was quiet and careful and involved very few situations where something large and fast moved toward you. The deep survey program suited them. Long missions, minimal contact, extensive data collection. Safe. The Arden was not supposed to be anywhere near the human sovereignty zone. Its official survey corridor ran along the galactic rim, mapping low-density star clusters for the Agriculture and Settlement Commission. It was tedious, careful work. Exactly what Yevtal had signed up for. The anomaly appeared on day 394 of the mission. Yevtal had been cataloging a binary star system, 2 dim orange stars locked in slow orbit around each other, completely unremarkable, the kind of system that existed in the billions across the Orion arm without anyone caring, when the long-range passive sensors registered something that should not have been there. A signal. Not a communication signal. Not navigation, not beacon, not emergency. A structured energy emission, complex and regular, coming from a region of space that the charts marked as empty. Yevtal checked the charts. Checked them again. The source of the signal was 4 light-years inside the human sovereignty zone. Protocol was clear. Passive observation only. Do not approach the boundary. Do not attempt to communicate. Log the data and report on return to station. Yevtal followed protocol. He pointed every passive sensor the Arden possessed at the signal source and recorded for 11 days, which was how long it took for his courage, or possibly his scientific curiosity, which in Kethmar was often indistinguishable, to suggest that moving 4 light-years closer to the boundary might improve resolution without technically crossing it. He did not cross the boundary. He came within approximately 700,000 kilometers of it, which the protocol defined as approaching but not breaching, and he told himself this distinction was meaningful while his hands performed the course adjustment. What the improved sensors showed him took 11 hours to fully process. Not because the computers were slow, but because Yevtal kept stopping the analysis to look at the raw data again, to check his calibration, to run secondary verification. Because what the data showed was not possible. Not according to anything in the GTA science database. Not according to anything in his 9 years of deep survey experience. The signal source was not a station. Not a ship. Not any structure recognizable in any catalog he had access to. It was a point in space, apparently empty space, from which energy was emerging in patterns that his analysis software flagged as artificial, purpose unknown, complexity rating, maximum. Maximum was not a category that appeared often in survey software. The category above it read, consult specialist. Yevtal did not have a specialist. He had himself and 11 months of survey data, and a growing sense that he had accidentally looked at something that was not meant to be looked at. On day 406, the signal changed. It had been consistent for 12 days, the same complex, structured emission regular as a heartbeat. Then, without any prior variation, it shifted. The frequency changed. The pattern changed. And for exactly 37 seconds, it stopped being directed outward in all directions equally and became directional. Pointed directly at the ardent. Yevtal prepared a course back toward GTA space. He had his hand on the engine controls. And he documented this honestly in his report because Kethmar valued honesty and also he needed to process it, terrified. The signal came through the communications array. Not as a radio broadcast. Through the array, directly interfaced with the ship's internal messaging system, appearing as text on Yevtal's personal console screen as if it had been sent by a crew member. It read, Yevtal. We see you. You are not in violation. You have been careful and we appreciate that. What you are observing is a prototype. We are testing it. It does what you think it does and more that you haven't detected yet. We are telling you this because you will go back and file a report, and the report will say you detected an energy anomaly of unknown origin, and your supervisors will spend considerable resources trying to figure out what it is. We prefer to save everyone the effort. Call it infrastructure. Call it the next step. Call it whatever your database needs it to be. Just know that it works. There was a pause. Then a second message. Go home, science officer. You've done good work out here. The RIM surveys are genuinely useful, we read them. Safe travels. Yevtal went home. He filed the report. He included the message verbatim, because omitting it would have been a falsification of scientific record. His supervisors classified the file within an hour of receiving it. His section director called him personally, the first time a section director had called a survey officer directly in living memory, and asked him, in a very careful voice, to describe the signal characteristics in more detail. Yevtal described them. The section director was quiet for a long time. Then she said, What do you think they were testing? Yevtal had thought about this for the 11 days of return travel. He had thought about the phrase, does what you think it does, and more. He had thought about the energy profile, the structured complexity, the way it had emerged from apparently empty space. He had run every model in his database. I think, he said carefully, that they have found a way to build things without building them. To place infrastructure in space without transporting it there. 2. He stopped. Started again. In human mythology they have stories about beings who could speak things into existence. I think they've found a way to do something like that. To transmit construction. To print structures directly into space using energy fields. He paused. I think the empty zone isn't empty. I think it's full. I think everything we can't see is what they haven't activated yet. The section director closed the communication. Yevtal went home. He requested a transfer to a survey route nowhere near the Kepler periphery, citing personal reasons, which was accepted without question. He had been right about one thing. He had looked at something that was not meant to be looked at. He had just been wrong about why. It had been shown to him on purpose. The invitation came without warning, which was itself a kind of warning. The Galactic Trade Authority had learned, over 60 years of careful observation, that when humans did something without warning, it was usually because they had planned it for a very long time and had simply chosen not to tell anyone about the planning. This was not malicious. It was just how they were. They planned in private and arrived in public, and the gap between those two states was where most of the galaxy's anxiety lived. The invitation was delivered simultaneously to every GTA member world, every independent station, every registered trading vessel in the Orion Arm. It arrived on all communication frequencies at once, in all known languages, translated with a precision that suggested the translations had been prepared in advance, possibly years in advance, by people who had spent a great deal of time thinking about how to say what they needed to say. It read, "The human sovereignty is pleased to announce the completion of the first civilization phase. We are opening our borders to full galactic commerce and cultural exchange, effective in 30 standard days. All are welcome. We ask only that visitors review the attached protocols, which are brief, reasonable, and non-negotiable. We look forward to meeting you, properly this time." The attached protocols were, as promised, brief. 3 pages. They covered behavior in human space, trade regulations, cultural interaction guidelines. They were written with a directness that was either refreshing or alarming depending on how much experience you had with legal documents. Every rule was clear. Every consequence for violation was stated without euphemism. And at the very end, in text slightly larger than the surrounding paragraphs, was a single line. "We have been watching the galaxy for 60 years. We know who you are. We are glad you are still here." Ambassador Thessaly Vor, retired now, 81 years old, reading the invitation from the garden of her home on the Drosian homeworld, read that last line 3 times. Then she went inside and found the private log she had written 60 years ago, the night after Ambassador Okafor's speech, and she read that too. "I saw a species negotiate from certainty. Not the certainty of force. The certainty of direction. They know where they are going." She had been right. She had simply underestimated how far. The first ship to legally enter human sovereignty space on the day the border opened was a small Drosian merchant vessel, not because Drosians were first in line, but because her captain had arrived at the Kepler boundary 31 days early and waited. His name was Selvor. He was the daughter of Sel, who had once been a young navigator who almost talked a cautious captain into flying through a red zone on a chart. His mother had told him the story once when he was very young, and he had never forgotten the way she described what it felt like to read Drevsol's account. Like being told that the dark at the end of the corridor isn't empty. It's just waiting. When Selvor's ship crossed the boundary, there was no silence. There were signals everywhere, structured, organized, layered in complexity that his instruments struggled to parse. There were lights, impossibly many of them, scattered through space in patterns that looked, from a distance, like a second star field overlaid on the first. Stations, platforms, relays, habitats. The infrastructure of a civilization that had built in secret for 6 decades and was now, all at once, visible. A human voice came over his communications channel. "Come. Professional." With the faint warmth of someone who had rehearsed this moment and was genuinely happy it had arrived. "Welcome to human sovereignty space, merchant vessel Arden 2. You're the first. We're glad you made it." Pause. "We know your family's connection to this border. It seemed appropriate." Another pause, shorter. "Your docking assignment is Station Kepler Prime, Bay 17. They're saving a good parking spot." Selvor looked out his forward viewport. Kepler Prime was, enormous was not the word. Enormous implied a comparison point. It was simply there, in the way that a mountain is simply there when you round a corner expecting a hill. A structure of white and silver and the deep, particular blue that humans favored for large constructions, rotating slowly, blazing with light. Around it the other ships were arriving. Thousands of vessels from dozens of species, streaming through the open boundary for the first time, all of them seeing the same thing Selvor was seeing and responding in the way that all spacefaring species respond to the genuinely unexpected. Silence, and then, slowly, the sounds of people trying to find words for what their eyes were telling them. What humanity had built, what they had spent 60 years constructing in the privacy of a zone that the whole galaxy had been asked and had agreed not to enter, was not simply infrastructure. It was a demonstration. A physical argument, made in steel and light and the accumulated decades of a species that had gone quiet to do something important. The argument was this: we are capable of more than you knew. More than we knew. We needed the space to find out. In the council chambers of the GTA, senior members were already reviewing the protocols, drafting the first trade agreements, scheduling the diplomatic delegations. The work of integration, careful, complicated, consequential, had begun. It would take years. It would take patience. It would take, on both sides, the kind of trust that can only be built by first establishing that the trust is real. Quell 9, retired now, old, watching the news feed from a station bar not unlike the one where Calathru had once pushed away a drink and asked for water, saw the images of Kepler Prime and thought about a red zone on a star chart and an 11-day detour and a cargo of spoiled ferium spores that had cost him a contract and a client and several sleepless nights. He thought about the line from Drevsol's account that had stayed with him for 30 years. Whatever they are protecting or building or becoming, they have decided that the rest of the galaxy does not get to know. Not yet. Now was the yet. He ordered a drink. A good one this time, the kind you ordered for a celebration, not the kind you ordered because the alternative was sitting with your thoughts. He raised it, alone at the bar, to a screen full of ships and light and the opening of something enormous. To the law, he said, meaning the one law everyone knew but most had never quite believed. Stay out of human space. It had been obeyed. More or less. Well enough. And now it was over, not broken but completed. A rule that had existed not to keep the galaxy out, but to keep humanity in long enough to become what it had been trying to become. The screen showed more ships crossing the boundary, an endless patient stream. Every species. Every flag. All at once and all together. Quol 9 Drake. It tasted like the future, which was perhaps why it was so hard to describe.